Good morning. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Unitarian Universalist Church of Tucson. For those of you who I don't know, my name is Reverend Bethany Russell Lowe, and I have the great pleasure and honor of serving as this congregation's minister. Our community is striving to be as varied as the blooms of the Sonoran Desert, so whoever you are, whoever you've been, and whoever you are on the path to becoming, I invite you to bring all of that, your whole self, here and now. Carson Woodruff is back as our guest pianist this week. Please say hi and offer some gratitude to Carson after the service today. We are a covenantal community, so in this time of continuing pandemic, when cases are rising again, cases of COVID are rising again, and flu and RSV, among other things, we are masking when we are here in worship. Some of us are asking for some social distance. We ask that you respect that. And we do have an expectation that if you're here with us in person, you are as vaccinated as you can be. So if you are here with us in person, that is your hope. If you're unwilling to be vaccinated, you are welcome to join our worship services. We just ask that you join us online next week. I extend a special welcome to any visitors or people who feel like they might be visitors and invite you to fill out a guest information card. If you're joining us on YouTube, Mary Weiss, our administrator, will post a link in the YouTube chat to that online form right now. And if you're here in person, just come on over to Social Hour and there will be a welcome center where there'll be clipboards with some yellow sheets of paper for you to fill out if you want to stay in touch with us. And we will meet for social hour right after the service in Goddard. There will be refreshments and snacks and also lunch today. Yay! On the menu today is a baked potato bar for $10 if you'd like that. Also after service today, our grief and loss group will meet at noon in the Read Room. So if you are experiencing a grief or loss in your life, you are welcome to join that. It's a peer support group. Also, next Saturday, of interest to a few folks here, I think, next Saturday will be the party for Rick Meyer to honor Rick Meyer's life. So if you'd like to join that party, which was Rick's request, having a party, not a service, plan on joining us in Goddard Hall at 2 p.m. on Saturday. And you might notice, if you're here in person, that our sanctuary looks a little different this week. Our quilting group hung up some of their beautiful pieces this week, so I encourage you to admire them both during or after the service. Thank you to our quilters for getting that installed and for sharing your art with us. And our yard sale raised nearly $2,600, which is just fabulous. Big thanks to Barbrika, Margot Newhouse, and all those volunteers who helped to make that yard sale happen. And after this Trans Day of Visibility, on this Trans Day of Remembrance, our AV team asks for a special shout out. So if you're here in person, if you're able to stand up and turn around and just greet our AV team, and we're gonna give them some love on the camera too. Hi. They do such a good job for us week in and week out, and when they do their job really well, we don't even remember that they're there sometimes. Thank you, folks. And now I encourage you to turn to your neighbor and tell them about a time that you felt totally welcome, like you could be your whole self.
I've got a lucky
in a world where our margins in favor of democracy are still very, very narrow, and where climate negotiations are still not quite equitable, and war wages and fires burn, and snow accumulates feet before winter has begun, I offer these words for our weary souls. From Yosemir Reyes via Mahente, he writes, "Some days you may wake up sad. Some days you may wake up frustrated. Some days you may wake up tired. Some days you may wonder if it's worth it. Some days you may question your own growth. Some days you may think on how immense the world is to be caged in this country, to be subjugated to all this abuse. Some days you just want to breathe. And baby," he writes, "I am here to remind you to sit in those moments, to sit in that whirlpool. But just know that there are people like me picking up the load when you can't. There are people like me pushing so that the weight of this country does not crush you. That there are people like you who will fight when I can't. We will take turns pushing against these walls. I got your back and you got mine, and in the scheme of things, does anything else matter? Even if our fight is unfruitful, we will depart with our dignity intact. We will depart knowing that this country is losing a prized possession. This country is losing the gift of our resilience. We will watch them as they tear into each other's skins and thank the heavens we never turned beasts like them." Come in this spirit, friends. Let us worship together.
And please join me in our words of chalice lighting, which come from Reverend D. Vandiver. "We light this chalice, symbol of our faith, alive in this world, naming our vision of collective liberation and daring to remember each other into beloved community."
Our first hymn this morning is one that's a little less well known. So I'm going to sing the first verse and then ask you to join me on the first verse as we repeat it and sing through the song. Since you're learning it and since the words are going to be new, keep your seats, but sit in your seats like you're standing. And that's just to make sure everybody can see the words as they pop up. Oh, the beauty in a life that illumines honor anew, that models wise and gracious ways to every seeker, that every day shall serve in joy and do the right. Oh, praise the life whose beauty shows a justice true. Would you join me on that? Oh, the beauty in a life that illumines honor anew, that models wise and gracious ways to every seeker, that every day shall serve in joy and do the right. Oh, praise the life whose beauty shows a justice true. Second verse. Let not service of the good be confined to great saints alone, but every hour be part of all our daily living. Said not the hope of wisdom's grace beyond our kin. How wide the path, how close the goal which love has shown. Oh, the beauty of a life that illumines care of a soul, that knows a love that is for self as well as others, that every day embodies praise for every good. This is the path to which we turn our garden goal. This is the faith. This is the faith to which we turn our garden goal.
Our earth is strong. It can hold our pain and our joy, our love and our anger, our shared bowl, which we use each week, is strong enough to hold the big rocks, our collective celebrations and mournings, and also the smaller stones that will be added to signify our individual joys and sorrows. In particular, I lift up the people of Colorado Springs and Club Q, who experienced a terrible tragedy last night. We who live in the desert know that water is a life-sustaining and scarce resource. Let us remember those desert people who first came to this place. We honor the Hohokam, the Yavapai, the Tohono O'odham, the Yaqui, the people who no longer exist as tribal entities here in Arizona. Let's remember those who are walking through our desert right now without access to water. We pour water from a plastic jug, similar to the ones used by those seeking to assure greater access to water in the desert, like our ministry partner, No More Deaths. If you have a joy or sorrow to share, I invite you to go to menti.com and put in the code, and it will be on the screen momentarily. If you are here in person, you are welcome to come up to the table and put a stone in the water to symbolize your joy or sorrow. The pebbles create ripples of hope.
I'll read your mentee responses. Yes, sharing in the heartbreak from another hateful shooting event. Many of us are joining you. Someone is celebrating the passing of a test for one step closer to high school graduation. Yay! Sharing sorrow for those who continue to die in war and anger at those who condone the killing. Yes, great sorrow. Grateful for my kids and our delightful adventures outside this month. It has been a lovely month for outside things. Now, as part of our joys and sorrows, I'm going to read the names of the 32 trans and non-binary people in the United States who have been killed since November 2021. These are the names we know. We acknowledge that this list is incomplete due to unaccountable policing systems and transphobia that persist in our world, and due to the sensationalization of violence against trans and non-binary folks, which focuses on how they died rather than how they lived. We are going to learn a little bit this morning about each person whose name I will read. Here we remember their lives too. Tiffany Banks, and there are pictures appearing on the screen. Go back to that first one, thank you. Tiffany Banks lived in Miami, Florida, and was a social butterfly. Her family says that when she was around, there was never a dull moment. She was 25. Samaj Billingsley resided in Jacksonville, Florida. He was a huge fan of Megan Thee Stallion and cared deeply about his friends. He was 33. A.C. Morrison was two-spirit and living in Rapid City, South Dakota. She was a helpful person who always was there for her friends. She was described as kind-hearted and joyous. She was 30. Maya Allen lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and was full of joy and laughter. She was an empowerer of transgender women, and she often posted selfies of herself all done up on social media, like this one you see. She was 35. Dee Dee Ricks lived in Detroit, Michigan, and she was 33 when she was killed. Maddie Hoffman lived in Malvern, Pennsylvania, and is one of 6 siblings who grew up in both New Jersey and Vermont. She was 47. Erin Lynch lived in McLean, Virginia, and was an avid writer and voracious student. He was 26. Candy Reed was a model and performer in Kansas City, Missouri. She was 29. Hayden Davis lived in Detroit, Michigan, and loved fashion, makeup, and the Kardashians. She had a brilliant smile, as you can see. She was 28. Maricela Castro lived in Houston, Texas, and was described by a friend as a bright and sunny person who never made an enemy. She died on the eve of her 40th birthday. Cherry Bush lived in Los Angeles, California, and was experiencing homelessness when she was killed at the age of 48. Keshia Chanel Gator was an advocate for the LGBTQIA+ community and was very family-oriented. She could make anyone laugh. She was traveling through Augusta, Georgia when she died at the age of 26. Martazia Richmond was well-loved by her friends in Chicago, Illinois. She was 30. Kitty Monroe loved her Yorkie dogs, her friends, and her family. She lived in Memphis, Tennessee. Chaminade Giselle Marie worked as a personal care assistant in Gulfport, Mississippi, and was remembered as loving, kind, funny, and generous. She was 27. Brazil Johnson was a talented chef and passionate LGBTQIA+ advocate who lived in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. She was 28. Sasha Mason lived in Zebulon, North Carolina, and was beloved by her family and a friend to many. Those close to her described her as sweet, kind, and generous with a great smile. She was 45. Shanalika Yaela Dior Hemingway lived in Albany, New York, where she had just graduated with her bachelor's degree. She was known for her smile, and her family said she had a bright future. She was 30. Nedra Sequence Morris was strong, feisty, and opinionated, living in Opa-locka, Florida. She was 50. Ray Muscat worked at a grocery store in Oakland County, Michigan. He was described as a kind soul. He was 24. Fern Feather was a kind and free-spirited person living in Morristown, Vermont. They brought joy to everyone they knew and made people feel valued. They were 29. Ariana Mitchell lived in Hampton, Virginia, and was truly unique, funny, and loved by everyone. She was 17. Mia Love Parker lived in Chester, Pennsylvania, and was a bright light to many people's lives. She was 25. Kenyatta Kesha Webster lived in Jackson, Mississippi, where she was surrounded by family and friends who loved her. She was 24. Catherine, or Katie Newhouse, lived in Canton, Georgia, and was a neurodivergent person with a passion for hiking, sightseeing, and advocating for trans rights. She was 19. Tatiana LaBelle lived in Chicago all her life and was a fan of Mariah Carey and Patti LaBelle. She was 33. Paloma Vasquez was an advocate for trans and Latina rights in Houston, Texas. She was 29. Matthew Angelo Spampinato was a barista at a Starbucks in Newcastle, Delaware, where he was described as selfless by his coworkers. He was 21. Naomi Skinner lived in Highland Park, Michigan, and was described as a very outstanding person who lived a fabulous life. She was 25. Cypress Ramos was an advocate for her local LGBTQIA+ community in Lubbock, Texas. She was 21. Deval Princess was a well-known hairstylist and LGBTQIA activist in Jacksonville, Florida. She was 24. Amari Lej lived in Wilkinsburg, Pennsylvania, and was a dancer and dance coach for her local hip-hop dance team. She was 20. Let's hold a moment of silence as we hold these names, these stories, this morning in our hearts and minds. And I invite you now to continue in that spirit of meditation or prayer. These words for prayer were written for Transgender Day of Remembrance by Reverend Sunshine Jeremiah Wolf. These words were written for a trans and gender non-binary or non-conforming audience in mind. If you are not one of those things, you might not feel this prayer is directed towards you, and I invite you to sit with that and receive the words as they come. O infinite love, help me face this day. My heart weeps with fear of violence, of invisibility, of hatred. Open me to beauty and wholeness, to love and laughter. I am enough. We are enough. I live in the sacred in-between. I embody the connectivity and allness of the infinite. May I remember that I am inherently sacred by my existence. The earth is filled with magnificent diversity of which I am a small piece. May I remember I am part of the spectacular beauty of a diverse world, dependent on that diversity, my existence for its survival. When I feel lost, may I hold to the earth and to community. When I feel invisible, may I have the strength to shout joyous gratitude from the rooftops for all who have seen me. When violence is before me, I ask for grace through the next moment. When I feel connected, may I share my love with those around me. When I feel seen, may I see others in need. When I am secure, may I rise up for the security of others. Oh, infinite love, thank you for the gift of the transcendent both and infinite liminal glue connectivity. May I rest in the transcendent space today and for all days to come. Aho, Amin, Ashe.
This next refrain is easy enough that you'll catch it quickly. As you catch it, I may start singing different rhythms or melodies, and I invite you to do the same. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. One time loudly. Softer now. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong. Softer still. When the world is sick, can't no one be well, but I dreamt we was all beautiful and strong.
Let there be an offering to sustain and strengthen this place, which is sacred to so many of us, a community of memory and hope, for we are now the keepers of the dream. Now an offering will be collected to support the life and work of our congregation. If you're joining us on live stream, you can send a check to the office, give online at uuctucson.org/donate, or text 833-361-5796. If you're here in person, the ushers will be coming around now with the offering baskets to collect your donations.
Is a Mermaid by Jessica Love. This is a boy named Julian, and this is his abuela, and those are some mermaids. Julian loves mermaids. Vámonos, mijo. This is our stop. Abuela, did you see the mermaids? I saw them, mijo. Abuela, I am also a mermaid. I'm going to take a bath. You be good. Julian has a good idea. Uh-oh. Come here, mijo. For me, abuela. For you, Julian. Where are we going? You'll see, says abuela. Mermaids, whispers Julian. Like you, mijo, let's join them. And they do.
Thank you to Jamili for her expert work on that story. Julian is a mermaid. It's also a picture book, a pictures are from that if you want to pick it up for your grandkids or your kids. The first Transgender Day of Remembrance took place on November 28th, 1999, 1 year to the day after Rita Hester, a Black trans woman living in Boston, was murdered in her own apartment. Rita was born in Hartford, Connecticut, and her family describes that she was just always female, always understood as female by those who loved her. She moved to Boston as a young adult for a greater level of acceptance she found there. And when she moved to Boston, she became a quick fixture in both the gay and the straight nightclub scenes in Boston, particularly the rock club scenes. On the night she died, police were called at 6:12 p.m. about a fight happening in her apartment. They arrived within 7 minutes, and though they said she was still alive when they got there, it took over an hour for them to get her to the hospital. And she died of cardiac arrest before she got medical care she needed. Rita's murder took place in 1998, just a few weeks after the other also brutal murder of Matthew Shepard across the country in Wyoming. And Matthew Shepard's murder, as some of you will remember, was somewhat of a catalyst for change in hate crime legislation in some states across the country, aided in great part by the compassionate media and the horror expressed by some of that liberal media. At the same time, just weeks later, Rita's story didn't reach national news. And even in the local news, they consistently dehumanized her in the local media, at least those who cared to report on her murder at all. The local Boston LGBTQIA magazine, The Bay Windows, misgendered her and dead-named her in the press. In the years before Rita was killed, at least 3 other trans folks in the Metro Boston area had also been murdered. And Rita had spoken out about their deaths and expressed that she had hoped for justice to come to one of their killers. Even though there was physical evidence of the person who murdered Rita in her apartment, that person was never identified. It is important to remember Rita's life as well as her death. And it's important to remember not only the deaths, but also the lives of all the trans and gender non-binary, non-conforming folks who are killed. This is why I told you about Rita's life and death today on this Transgender Day of Remembrance. And to be very fair and clear, there are numerous and valid critiques of the practice of holding Transgender Day of Remembrance services on November 20th, as some communities are accustomed to doing. There's a special critique when it happens in predominantly white, predominantly cisgender, predominantly upper middle class communities, which is ours, predominantly, right? Mariam wrote a blog post in 2013 outlining why they did not participate in TDOR, that's the acronym for Trans Day of Remembrance events. They critique who is on these lists that are usually compiled by the Human Rights Commission, and they critique how race and class might impact how people are remembered. They also point out that the list is compiled for TDOR services is just people who are killed by other people or the police. It doesn't include people who have died because of the transphobia rampant in our medical system. It doesn't include people who've died because of addiction. It doesn't include people who've died by suicide. Reverend M. Barclay of Enfleshed concluded that TDOR can be a way that sometimes predominantly white, upper middle class, cisgender communities appropriate grief for those from those who are not white, not cisgender, and poor. And they encourage us to address white supremacy culture, as well as the myth of the gender binary and classism in communities year-round, and also at these TDOR events. I'm honoring Transgender Day of Remembrance today and read those names earlier because I trust that we can mourn without appropriating grief. I trust that we can hold the horrors, true horrors of transphobic violence without sensationalizing it. And because we have made recent commitments to uproot white supremacy and other oppressions in our community, it feels important to be doing this today. The eighth principle of Unitarian Universalism, which you all voted to adopt just about 18 months ago, calls the work of anti-racism and anti-oppression our journey towards spiritual wholeness. This principle calls us to uproot racism and other oppressions in our culture, in our communities, and in ourselves internally. And we do this so that we can become spiritually whole. And on this Transgender Day of Remembrance, it is a good reminder for all of us, I think, to remember that none of us is free as long as gender is binary. Because as long as gender is binary, there will be transphobia. If we cling to this idea that gender is just two, that boxes are very clear, we are clinging to the root of transphobic oppression. And if we want to undo oppressions rooted in this gender binary, we need to transform ourselves to become spiritually whole and to understand the complexities of gender in us, our own gender. Each of our genders is different and diverse. In a Transforming Hearts collective course that many of us have taken, the facilitators, Alex Capitan and Reverend Michael Slack, encouraged us to imagine beyond the gender binary. They encouraged us to examine our own gender as it had manifested throughout our lives. They asked us questions in small groups to remember your first experience of gender. When did you first learn you had a gender? They asked us to see how our gender had or hadn't changed throughout our lives. We were asked about our gender expression and how we had shrunk or grown from peer pressure, or how we had grown from acceptance. In my small group, the stories that arose from these questions were diverse and multifaceted. We all told stories of gender being forced upon us and how we hadn't yet escaped those binds. We told stories about what clothing we've worn throughout our lives, what felt right, what felt worse, what we have settled with for now. We told stories about the power of choosing your own expression and how liberating that felt. What one of us felt stuck in, a part of gender that one of us felt stuck in, others felt the exact same thing was an authentic part of who they are. Our stories contradicted one another, but in a really beautiful way, because from that contradiction, we learned that gender isn't just two boxes, or even two boxes with a middle box, but multiple, a matrices even, not even a spectrum. It's a multi-dimensional thing. Our stories were so different and yet so related, and we began to see, it was 4 cisgender white ladies in my group, we began to see that quantifying gender, putting numbers on gender, 2, 3, maybe 4-ish, it was just impossible. Gender can't be quantified. We learned that our genders are neither binary nor static, that is, the same all the time. Gender is as unique as any other part of your identity. It is unique as you are. And like us, our gender had changed throughout our lives. When did you first realize your gender? How has your understanding of gender changed throughout your life? What impacts has gender had on your life? If we sat and answered these questions one by one right now, I'm sure we would have as many different articulations of gender as we have people here. Many of us might feel that we still fit pretty squarely, pretty neatly into male and or female identifiers, and that's okay, that's good, it's part of the matrix. And the important thing that I think to take away is that gender is more than 2, more than 3, it is infinite. Gender is yours to define and claim and express. Freeing ourselves from the gender binary will not save the world alone, right? But it will help us transform ourselves and our community, which are both parts of the UUCT's mission statement. If we can understand our gender as unique rather than prescribed, we can begin to understand how others defy the construction of gender and those who intentionally queer gender. If we acknowledge that we don't fit perfectly into a box ourselves, it will be easier for us to not ask that of others, explicitly or implicitly. This is part of creating a beloved, welcoming community. In a conversation on the podcast Finding Our Way with Prentice Hemphill, Alok, an internationally renowned gender nonconforming writer and performance artist, talked about what would make the world a better place for them. And they said, democratize love. Love the earth, love the people around you, love everyone. To just appropriate love within the confines of romance is not liberatory. The purpose of love is to love so extensively and vehemently that you can connect with everyone. They continue, the way we resist violence is not just through diagnosing it and giving evidence of it, but also of countering it with love. So they continue, as someone who has experienced street harassment, I started to think, what is the opposite of street harassment? It's not just anti-violence. That's a meager articulation of what I need. The opposite of street harassment is public love. What would it look like, I got thinking after I listened to this, what would it feel like or sound like to show public love for others, or even just for yourself? What would it take to make everyone you encounter feel like Julian in the story today? We say in the welcome words each week, you are welcome here, whoever you are, whoever you've been, and whoever you are becoming. Because we are all always on a path to becoming our most authentic selves. And our hope here is that this can be a place where your authentic self can shine. Because where you can rest in your inherent worth and dignity. Because all our lives are blessed with that inherent worth and dignity, and here we work to make that blessing real. May we each work to show love for everyone in our communities, everyone we meet, and most of all for ourselves. If I build this world from love, if you build this world from love, if we build this world from love, the world will become a place of love.
This next song is in Hebrew and English. We'll sing both the Hebrew and English twice. It's fairly easy. I think you'll catch it if you don't know it already. Olam hesed yibaneh, yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Olam hesed yibaneh, yadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Olam hesed yibaneh, dadadai, dadadai, dadadai. Olam hesed yibaneh, dadadai, dadadai. From love, da-da-da, da-da-da, da-da. And if you are able, or if you are willing, stand and try the Hebrew.
These words from Roddy Bell Shelton Biggs. Friends, thank you for your witness to all that exists on the margins. Thank you for your commitment to hold yourselves and others in great and steadfast love, moving forward from this space. May we continue to nurture spiritual growth. May we continue to travel along the winding path to healing from whatever brokenness we individually and collectively hold, knowing that we do not journey the path alone. Please have a seat for our chalice extinguishing.
And please join me in our words of chalice extinguishing, which are Hope Continues by Reverend Kevin Jago. When the candle dims, the wax almost spent, the light turns amber like a sunset. Still, it provides light. Still, it provides heat. Still, it can kindle new flame and pass its glow on and contribute to new illumination. When sunsets turn to new days, when seasons transform all, when the candle dims, all is not lost. Hope continues, uncertain and true, like candlelight, ready to spark again. All is not lost.